Hi again, welcome to 2011 Studies. This is the 4th of July. We're going to be looking at sort of a review of what I presented with the 2021-2024 timeline. I had a couple questions on it, and it seems that I have to be more clear on what I'm saying as far as that timeline. We started off looking in 2011. We started off looking at 2 Peter 3, how God is long-suffering. The husbandman, vine dresser, who is God, waits for the early and latter rain to produce the precious fruit of the earth. Okay, we know this was in the context of the coming of Christ unto the coming of the Lord, and it was also dictated inside 2 Peter 3 that the flood was a time marker. One day is as 1,000 years, as 1,000 years is a day. So we hit the 7,000 year mark in 2011. Then we looked at the possibility of the 7 years of Jacob's trouble from 2011 to 2018. Then curiously, I went back to the study on James, and we looked again at the timeline mentioned there, or the two people were Job. Job was enduring with patience the attack of Satan, and we looked at Elijah. When we really closely looked at Elijah again, we noticed something very curious in the study we did, go to the sea 7 times. So we're asking the question, why did Elijah tell the servant to go? When he came back, he saw nothing. They were looking for some possibility, some show of rain. Will this great abundant rain come? Now, this is also in the context of the 3rd year of Elijah, where we go to James and we find that Elijah prayed for no rain for 3.5 years. He prayed again, and then there came the rain. Well, the account was mentioned in the Old Testament where Elijah, in the 3rd year, he told the servant to go to the sea after the first time and go 7 times. So I wonder, why is God allowing that language 7 times? Again, it could be a number of perfection. 7 is completion, but it also could be referring like sort of a principle that we studied, a day for the year principle, where 1 day represents a year. Would 7 times represent 7 years? And when we hit 2011, we had this teaching going on of no more salvation. And it really did seem like a great famine was happening. People teaching no more salvation, and they really, I guess they believe it. I can't believe they do believe it, but it's one of the teachings that went forth, and certain groups are still teaching this today. And that type of a famine and sort of a drought, it seems like that this relates to Elijah praying for no rain for 3.5 years. And yet, that would have brought us to 2011 to 2014, 3.5 years. And yet, past 2014, people were still teaching it. Well, what's going on here? Well, that 7 times might be 7 more years to the year 2021, and the latter rain, if the latter rain actually is not grouped with the early rain like it appears to in Joel 2, that the latter rain might be the final rain period before the coming of Christ. In other words, the 8,400 days starting in 1994, a Jubilee year, might have had the early rain, and then the latter rain would be happening when we finally reach the 2021 date. Now, that does fit with the believers consuming and destroying unto the end, as the gospel goes forth, like it says in the book of Daniel. Because another study we did was 36 and how the number of oppression, how that number related to the Philistine army, who had an army of 36,000. Well, what was it? The chariots and the horsemen combined were 36,000. And we saw how that was tied into the word oppression. Well, Satan is a great oppressor. And if his little season is 36 years, then from 1988, and you count 36 years upward to the year 2024, that would complete the 36 years. So, and the way 36 relates to the book of Revelation in 666 is if you add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 all the way to the number 36, including the number 36, you get 666. So we looked at that as a possibility. Well, we could be still having more years here past the year 2018. So we're looking at this, and we're very curious if this is going to be the timeline that God has allowed. And I'm still praying and looking about this, because this is something that is like, it would fit more if you really think about God's long suffering, has long patience for the early and the latter rain. Well, a 36-year period would fit that. The early rain comes first, and then God's season of salvation, and the latter rain. And in the book of Joel, how God will finally do great things after Satan has done great things, or has magnified himself. That's what that word means. This is called by the hand of the prophets. Hosea 12:9. And I that am the Lord thy God from the land of Egypt will yet make thee to dwell in tabernacles, as in the days of the solemn feast. I have also spoken by the prophets, and I have multiplied visions and used similitudes by the ministry of the prophets. Now, we can understand how God does this, because there's examples in the Old Testament who the prophets of old who became a similitude or likeness to what they were proclaiming. We looked at Jeremiah. He endured the captivity, and that was an illustration of what he was, preaching against. The judgment's going to fall on Jerusalem. And it got to the point where, as he brought that message, they wanted to kill him for that message, until a few stood up and said, no, what he's saying is in the scripture. So Ezekiel also, he laid on his side for so many days, representing the judgment on Israel. That's a similitude also. He became, or foreshadowed the judgment on Israel. This is Ezekiel 4:4. Lie thou on also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it, according to the number of days that thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. And then there was Daniel, and this is a very fascinating rendering of the ISA when you look at this verse in Daniel. This is Daniel 8:27. Daniel, who is given understanding concerning the evening mornings, 2300. And I, Daniel, now this is the ISA rendering, so it's going to be, it might sound a little archaic or weird, but this is what this language says. And I, Daniel, I was become, and I was ill days, and I am rising, and I am doing the work of the king. I am being desolated on the sight or the vision, and there is no understanding. So he's admitting he's being desolated. He's become a similitude of what the latter days are all about, what happens in the latter days. Now, I believe God does give this understanding to his people. Jesus in Matthew 24 warned about the abomination that makes desolate, as spoken by Daniel the prophet. Daniel stated, I am being desolated. Now, what about believers today? I do believe there could be an experience with the persecution of believers today that can be an indicator where we are in history. Like if there's persecution, maligning of the believers, Satan raising his ugly head to accuse as the accuser of the brethren. That's an interesting verse that pops up in my mind right now, is in Revelation, where it talks about the accuser of the brethren is cast down. Now has salvation come. Very, very interesting language. I'd have to look at that again to see what's the context. But there's definitely a season coming where, whether you read it in Joel 2 or James 5, wherever you read this language of God doing a great reversal, God will do great things. Now we have with the persecution and threats happening these days, in these final days, we have the illustration of Esther in the book of Esther and Haman. This is Esther 9:1. I'll read this in a little bit. Haman the destroyer wanted to kill all the Jews in one day. This plot, however, was reversed. This plot was set forth by the casting of lots, and the day chosen was Adar, 13th day of the 12th month. Now, why is this important today? Satan, knowing his time is short, also wants to kill and cause to perish. Abad. That's Hebrews 6. This word abad, H6, Hebrews 6, to destroy, is related to Abaddon, the destroyer, H11, from the book of Revelation. In Esther, the Jews were told to be ready against the day Haman and his lot casting had chosen. So I think it was for a full year that they cast these lots, and then it landed on a certain day, and that was Adar, and in the month of Adar. And we looked at this previously, and how Adar actually means to be magnified, and God is magnified. I could post some verses on that to show that again. But there was a great thing that happened. When that day arrived, it was reversed, and the Jews had victory over their enemies. Then what happened? This is Esther 9:1. Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. Then comes the letters of peace and truth. This is all related to the gospel going forth. And I think that verse in Matthew 24, where Christ was listing all this stuff, and he says, the gospel of the kingdom will go forth, and then the end will come. So there's a great push, and I think these letters of peace and truth could very well relate to the year 2021 to 2024. And remember, 2024 would complete the 36 years of Satan's oppression. 2021 is 10 years past 2011, and that's that would also, as far as the timeline goes, it could also mean the 3.5 years of no rain, and then the 7 times which Elijah told his servant to go to the sea, and on the 7th time he saw the cloud. Okay, that's the sign of rain. So we have this timeline, and I've been really very, very curious about. Why did God say 7 times there? I mean, I might have glossed over that before. I had really not paid that much attention to it. I knew about it because of you look up the fist or the size of the hand or something, whatever it says there. And then it says abundant rain, and that's when Elijah ran before Ahab and won. He got there first. Okay, so then comes the letters of peace and truth, Esther 9:29. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. Esther 9:30. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus with words of peace and truth. I wanted to show once again, as we've studied this before, how in Jeremiah the peace and truth combined as a phrase relates to the gospel, and how God actually heals and cures during this time. Jeremiah 33:4. For thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, concerning the houses of this city and concerning the houses of the kings of Judah, which are thrown down by the mounts and by the sword. They come to fight with the Chaldeans, but it is to fill them with the dead bodies of men, whom I have slain in mine anger and in my fury. For all those wickedness, and for all whose wickedness I have hid my face from this city. We looked at that too at the time of the flood, God hiding his face. Behold, I will bring in health and cure. I will cure them, and will reveal unto them the abundance of peace and truth. I will cause the captivity of Judah and the captivity of Israel to return, and will build them as at the first. I will cleanse them from all their iniquity, whereby they have sinned against me, and I will pardon all their iniquities, whereby they have sinned, and whereby they have transgressed against me. And it shall be to me a name of joy, a praise and an honor before all the nations of the earth, which shall hear all the good that I do unto them. And they shall fear and tremble for all the goodness and for all the prosperity that I procure unto it. That's very similar to what happened in Esther. The fear of the Jews came upon them. And this is saying, and they shall fear and tremble for all the goodness and for all the prosperity I procure unto it. But when you're reading Jeremiah 33:6, behold, I will bring in health and cure, I will cure them, and reveal unto them the abundance of peace and truth. That relates to salvation. That relates to how the letters of peace and truth in the book of Esther went forth after the destroyer attempted to kill and silence the Jews of that day. And we see this really good comparison of how this possibly can start beginning in the year 2021. So when you see the hate building against Christians worldwide, you see it on the news, you see it, it is even in the political scene. I mean, there's such a division right now, it's not even funny. I've never seen anything like this. This is like something out of a movie that all civility is lost. And you have this just political division of, there's a real hatred out there. The good news is that God reverses the captivity, and the letters of peace and truth will go forth into all the world. As Matthew 24 says, the gospel will go forth into all the world, and then the end will come. And when I say end, I'm talking about God ushering in the new heavens and the new earth, the kingdom of Christ established. We have done away with the sin of this world, and Christ is reigning, and He has all power and all authority, and His enemies are His footstool. Everything is under the power and authority of Christ at that point. Now, in looking at the timing of Christ's coming, we turn back to James 5 and how God wants us to focus on Elijah and Job. And like I said earlier, this 3.5 years of no rain, when you study that, it's where the false worship happened. And there came a drought, and Elijah was told to go to the brook. The brook dried up, and the ravens fed him there. The brook dried up. He continued on until we finally get to the rain, the abundant rain, after 7 times, and that's what we've been really focusing on in this 2011 studies group. If we apply the 3.5 years of no rain to 2011 as gospels of no more salvation were birthed, could it be that 2014 was equal to the 3rd year of drought with Elijah's scenario? Then we would add 7 more years because the servant went 7 times. We'd add 7 more years to 2014 to arrive at 2021. And I asked the question, could the year 2021 begin the latter rain to produce this precious fruit of the earth? James 5:7. Be patient therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman, the vine dresser, waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and has long patience for it, until he receives the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. I mentioned that God will do great things, and I want to once again read this because this is so significant. And I really believe that when I looked at Joel 2 again, that the midsection there, when there is all this destruction going on and the barking of the fig tree and all that, when you get to a point where God does great things, what was confusing about Joel 2, let me say it this way, it opened up with the day of the Lord. But when you get down to all the way to the bottom, when it talks about the timekeepers being removed, and whosoever will, when the sun is darkened, whosoever will call upon the name of the Lord, he shall be rescued, he shall be saved. You have the great push before that of God doing great things. So the day of the Lord, I believe, is like right now the final period of history. But before that, God has to do great things. He has to cause the captivity to return, and abundance of peace and truth, and the gospel going out in a big way. So this is Joel 2:21. God will do great things as He sends the latter rain. Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord will do great things. Be not afraid, ye beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring. For the tree beareth her fruit, the fig tree and the vine do yield their strength. Be glad then, ye children of Zion. That's the believers. Be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God. For He hath given you the former rain moderately, and He will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first. That's always been a puzzle because month is italicized. It doesn't necessarily mean month, and it could actually read as the first. I still haven't really concluded on that, but we have a group of rain, the former rain, the latter rain, and He caused to come down to you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain. And I think those are all different Hebrew words associated with rain there. And the floors shall be full of wheat, and the fat shall overflow with wine and oil. That relates to the Spirit of God. And the wheat, the gospel. And I'll restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm, the caterpillar, and the palmer worm, my great army which I sent among you. And ye shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, that hath dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never be ashamed. So yeah, right now there could be like mocking and people, talking about, well, nothing happened again. You have a wrong date again. But it's not a matter of us lifting ourselves up, because we're just studying this. Imperfectly, yes, but we're still studying. We are commanded to watch, and we do watch. We do go to God's Word, and we continue to study and continue to study. And as slowly as God releases stuff, He does not release it all at once. There is no way that even any one individual can have all this information. It comes in bits and pieces, and it's important because if God didn't do it that way, then people could lift themselves up and say how great I am. I know God has revealed all this, to me. And it's just not the way it works. God used many prophets in the Old Testament, and He chose it to do it this way because the focus is never on one prophet. It's never on a single man. It's always related to His Word being established and being confirmed over thousands of years. And so when you have all the prophets declaring all this stuff, and a lot of similarities within that, and then in Christ, when, you know, in 33 AD, when he was, or 29 to 33 AD, when he was talking about, as spoken of by this prophet, as spoken of by Daniel the prophet, as spoken of by Jeremiah, whoever, he's referring to this, the solid word of God that's been tested in the fire 7 times, and it's pure, and that's how God has done it. So, you know, we looked at this number 36 with the Philistines and saw that the connection of the great oppressor with Satan was there. So we have this, when we count the number of the beast represented by 666, we see the number of how the number of oppression is seen, and we mentioned that already. It's numbers 1 through 36 total, when you just keep adding 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 all the way to 36, it comes to 666. And the questions I'm asking now is, could Satan's little season be 36 years? 36 years past 1988, the 13,000 year anniversary since creation, would be the year 2024. And the latter reign would begin in 2021. You know, I've always, when I was reading James, I've always looked at that as saying, okay, he prayed for no rain for 3.5 years, and he prayed again and the rain came. That was tricky. I mean, that was tricky, because it really did fit a 7-year, the time of Jacob's trouble, because, you know, if the first 3.5 there was no rain, well, it seemed logical that the other 3.5 would be the time of rain, and then so you had a possibility of a 7 years from 2011 to 2018, but it might have had a gap in between. In other words, there are two 3.5 year periods, but it's separated by 7 years in the middle. So from 2011 to 2014, 3.5, and then you have go to the sea 7 times, so we wait 7 more years, and finally the cloud was there at the 7th year, and that would be 2021, and then you had the 3.5 years at the end. So there are 2 3.5s. It's just that there's a 7 in the middle there, which, if that's the way God did it, that's the way he did it. So we looked at all this, the precious fruit of the earth. This is James 5:7. I've already read this. Yeah, be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waits for the precious fruit of the earth, and has long patience for it, until he receives the early and latter rain. Be also patient. This is where Job comes in. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. The precious fruit of the earth is salvation, redemption. 1 Peter 1:18. Forasmuch as ye know that you were not redeemed with corruptible things, as silver and gold, from your vain conversation received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot, who verily was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times for you, who by him do you believe in God, that raised him up from the dead and gave him glory, that your faith and hope might be in God. So the timeline we have, 1988 to 2011, is 23 years. That's the 8,400 days. From 2011 to 2014, Elijah's 3.5 years of no rain. Then comes the 7 times, or the 7 more years, until the year 2021. 2021 to 2024, 3.5 years of God's short work. And this is the timeline, 2021 to 2024. We're still reviewing and we're still looking at it carefully. But I am seeing this now as a very good possibility, because like I said, James appeared to be saying that Elijah prayed for rain, no rain for 3.5 years, and it didn't come. But then when we went back and looked at it, in the 3rd year, there was that telling of the servant to go to the sea 7 more times. Why? Why is that there? There has to be a good reason for it. And then at that point he was praying again, and the rain finally did come. And this does not mean that Elijah waited 7 years for his servant to come back. I mean, 7 times could have been just right away. It could have been 7 weeks. It could have been 7 months. But the whole thing is that I think it was right away, actually. But one after another until the 7th time where he finally saw the cloud. But what it represents could be very significant, and there's no way you can prove this, but it's a matter of looking at it, presenting it. Is this a possibility? Is this a good possibility? And we're going to know once we get into the period of latter rain. I believe when God reverses the things of Joel 2, and all of a sudden he starts doing great things, and he says, "Fear not, O land, for I will do great things." And then you see the language of reversal going on there. Well, I think we're going to pay attention to that and say, hey, yeah, God's doing this. Now we're finally here after all this study, after all the watching that we have done. So that's by the hand of the prophets. I'm still studying this. I'm still looking at it. But for now, I wanted to do a little bit of review on this because there's a few questions that came up. And I wanted to make sure that it was understood how that 3.5 years past 2011 to 2014, when that whole time period of no more salvation was being taught. Now God gave the rain moderately. There was salvation during that time. But they continue to teach this and continue on probably until 2021, when they're going to be in a very big shock, realizing that God is saving people during the latter rain, as the husbandman who waits for the precious fruit of the earth. So that's the study for now. I don't know what's next. I'm still going to just study and then post what I've studied. There's really no direction right now except for this. We're looking at this very carefully. Anyway, thanks for listening. Any questions, you can make comments below on the study, and or email me at 2011studies@gmail.com. God bless you. Thank you.